I want to welcome everybody to our closing celebration for the Clay Studio National. Thanks so much for being with us today. We are joined by 4 of our artists who are going to give some insight into the pieces that they made for the show or presented during the show. And I want to, as usual, just thank all the people who are here listening, because it's just a lovely thing to get to see everyone's faces and connect through this conversation. I will, in a few minutes, put a link in the chat, because if you are enjoying these conversations, I just want to remind you that we're happy to provide this free programming, but if you'd like to donate or become a member, that's a great way to support the Clay Studio, so we can continue this great programming for you. And we are excited. Also, another chance to support us coming up is the Mud Ball. That is our annual fundraising event that was going to be in April, but we've rescheduled it for September 17th. It will be totally virtual, but super fun. Anyone who buys a ticket will get a box full of goodies, and the night of the event will be a really fun program, including some wheel battles that you even can bet on. So keep your eyes open for some people in this chat room who are going to be highlighted through the wheel battles. Okay.
I was one of the wheel battlers.
Yes, Raymond, absolutely, crossover. And Jennifer Martin, who's our executive director, who's also here.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and no one can know. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I also just want to say, again, I mentioned a few minutes ago, this was our first ever hybrid exhibition. We were trying to solve the problem of not having the pressure, the financial pressure on artists to ship work to us if they weren't able to, but we didn't want to constrain them from being in the show. So actually the first thing we did was we made the application fee to the show optional. So if somebody didn't feel they could pay that, they didn't have to. And then we went from having 1 juror to 3 jurors. We decided during the process that it was more transparent and equitable if we had more than 1 person. So we were so pleased to have Lauren Sandler, Sana Musasana, and Kukuli Velarde as our 3 jurors. That was a great process. We had 400 objects come to be juried, so it was a big project, but it certainly was fun to see all of those works. And the 60 people who ended up in the show were, you know, those of the 400. So consider how important that was and how challenging it was. So thanks to all of you who are in the exhibition. And we are going to talk today with Casey Beck, Shannon Blakey, Trisha Kyner, and Raymond Rorke. And for lack of a better system, we're just going to go in alphabetical order. And we're going to start with Casey. Is that okay with you, Casey? Oh, yeah, there.
Yeah, sure thing.
Great. Okay. So Casey Beck received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Ceramics at the University of Wisconsin River Falls in the spring of 2019. During his undergraduate studies, Beck fell in love with atmospheric firing methods and has received numerous grants to pursue research in down firing both wood and soda kilns, along with investigating materials within these atmospheres. Beck has shown his work locally at galleries such as the Phipps in Hudson, Wisconsin, and at Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis, and has been included in many national juried exhibitions. He spent the summer of 2018 as a resident artist at the Cub Creek Foundation in rural Virginia, making pots and chopping wood, he says. Beck currently lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and works at Northern Clay Center, peddling wares in the sales gallery and teaching classes. He is a recipient of the 2020 Jerome Ceramic Artist Project Grant, in which he will continue to seek understanding of the process of down firing soda kilns. So,
all right.
I will share my screen so you all can see his beautiful work that is in the exhibition. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. That's a great introduction. Yeah, so as you can see, I've got this pouring pot. I'd call it a coffee pot. I'd make some coffee in it or something like that. But I've really, over the past 2 years, I've really started to appreciate pouring pots and really like making them. They provide a nice challenge, a technical challenge to make, but they also provide this like centerpiece for gatherings or for moments, I think. So I mean, coffee pots are great for the morning. Like I love a nice easy morning where I can spend some time and actually like make a nice cup of coffee and use this not this pouring pot, but any kind of pouring pot for my coffee. Or like, I really like making pictures as well. And I really like the community aspect that pictures provide, because typically pictures are only used when you have a gathering of people and you have a large beverage that you're sharing among the people. Obviously not in these odd times we're living in right now, but pre-COVID, I mean, I would really enjoy spending time with friends and using pouring pots as centerpieces, and they really provide a nice conversation and provide nice memories. And so the idea of memory is something that I really look for in pottery. And I started on this idea by collecting pottery and using it every day. And over time, like, these things accumulate energy and like, I'd say like memories to them, really. You remember times that you received the object, you bought it, and times that you use it. And there are items that become really special because of this. And through making pots, I hope to kind of create these memories both within the making process and also within like the sharing these pots with others. So through my making process, I really go for materials. I gravitate towards using materials that provide these memories and create like a basis for them to happen. And like Jennifer said, I've done a lot of research in downfiring, soda and wood kilns, and also materials. And I'm particularly interested in that interaction of material and atmosphere, and particularly during the cooling cycle of the kilns. And so through my research, I'm taking various materials and trying to understand them and trying to create these material compositions that will allow the fire in the kiln to paint its memories onto the surface of the wares. And through that, I've really gone into looking at molecular structures and molecular formula of clay bodies, and how the interaction with those and the atmosphere of the cooling really affect each other. And I've been looking more recently into clay bodies with that, and I've been really finding some interesting results from that. And through that Jerome grant that I received at Northern Clay Center, I've gone out to create a kind of a resource for others to use as well. And I've always been really interested, and have always really thought it was important to discern my information and my findings. And that's something that I've always done, and I really appreciate when other artists do that, because it gives you a basis for your research, and really allows like the overall understanding of the material and the medium to excel. And so through this resource that I've created online, I'm trying to highlight the firing processes that I use and the materials that I use, like my recipes and the cooling cycles and stuff like that, so that others can have that information and start like their own research off of that, or utilize that information for their own processes. And I found that there's a huge lack of that for soda firing in the United States. And I'm hoping that collectively artists, we can bring together good information on that. But yeah, moving along from that, with my pots, I really try to use the materials and the firing process to create these memories, but I also see them as a blank slate for the user to continue their thoughts, their memories, and continue that energy that the pots hold. And I don't really see pots being finished ever, really, because they're always accumulating that energy through use. And so like my pots come out of the kiln, but they're not done. I don't see them being done ever, really. But the ultimate goal is to have these pots being used every day and allow for others to experience the same thing that I experienced through using other people's pots and creating really special moments through that. So that's kind of the things that I've been thinking about recently within the scope of pottery. And not just with my work, but just in general, really, because pottery is a really powerful thing and really brings people together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, Casey. Thank you for sharing the wonderful thoughts that I think all can relate to and think fondly of right now. The idea of getting together and creating memory. And I know you're doing it on your phone. Could you see that I was going through your pictures?
Yeah, it popped up on my screen. Yeah, all those pots are from recent soda firings under this new research that I've been doing at Northern Clay Center.
Great. I meant to say earlier that I will, if people want to put stuff into the chat as we go along, I'm going to read the questions at the end. So I have some questions of my own already that popped up in my mind for Casey, and I bet other people have too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk. Appreciate it.
I'm just trying to, my screen is not, oh, there we go, not cooperating with me. And is it okay if I share that was this your first Zoom artist talk?
What's that?
You mentioned the other day this was going to be your first Zoom artist talk.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is my first time doing a Zoom artist talk. I think I've only done a couple artist talks in general, so I'm still figuring it out.
Well, you did great, so thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so now Shannon is going to talk. Shannon Blakey is an artist and educator from Columbia, Missouri. Shannon received his BFA in ceramics from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and his MFA in ceramics from Penn State University. Shannon's experience ranges from being an artist in residence at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, serving as teaching staff at the Lil Street Gallery in Chicago, and as a visiting professor at the University of Missouri. Shannon currently teaches at Rockbridge High School in Columbia, Missouri. Thank you, Shannon. Here we go.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. So the work that I've created for this show is a cup and saucer, or what I'm considering a cup and saucer. The piece, yeah, there it is. And I've got that here as well.
Ooh, there it is in real life. Yes.
So one of the things that I really like about these new bases that I'm starting with is the transparency that I'm getting with them. And so when you throw light through them, there's a lot of really cool things that start to happen with them. So the piece that's in this show is, I think, the first time I've had the opportunity to show these off. Here's a new, more recent base that I'm playing with. But again, you can start to see when it's close up, there's some kind of cool things that start to happen as light travels through that piece. So yeah, I was really excited to have this be one of the early pieces that brings together both the cup and the base that I'd been thinking about for a while, sketching in my sketchbook for a while, but actually finally like got it all together physically to put out into the world, and then to have it be in this show, I think was extra special because it was a really solid show. I've been making cups and saucers now, or at least working towards these cups and saucers now for a while. And they're being made out of found objects that I pull from life and then altered in my studio. Increasingly, I'm interested in water as a basic element and the interactions between water and humans. I have pulled casts directly from objects that either carry or hold water, and those things are embedded into the cup forms. And so the cup that you see in here actually has some elements that are cast from like a water bottle top and embedded into the surface, along with a number of other things that are pulled from life, textures that I'm pulling and then played with in the studio. I like water for its visual interest and ties to natural beauty. I like it for its elusiveness and its transformative properties. And I also like it for its potential ties to the political. So all three of those things are things that I feel like I'm thinking about and working on and trying to play with as I'm working with this body of work. If we go to the first slide of the grass, so this one here. Okay, so this isn't a photograph from many years ago, but it captures that moment. This is a plaster cast of a deer hoof that I just recently took in my backyard, but it relates to an event that took place many years ago when I was in grade school. My brother and I grew up with hundreds of acres behind us and spent a number of waking hours outside in the woods, is probably about as much as we possibly could. And I felt like this was really important in terms of sort of discoveries made. Oftentimes we would have one idea in mind. We would be on a search for persimmons or wanting to go build a fort. But discoveries made along the way oftentimes became more meaningful or just as significant as the original idea, going to collect persimmons. And in this case, we actually came across some deer tracks, and we were both so interested in, like, fixed on these that we ran back home, got some plaster, and made casts of these deer impressions. And I like this for a couple reasons. One, it allows you to take something, not the deer, but the traces of the deer, and help you to form ideas about your world, right? So rather than seeing the deer right there in front of you, obviously you're gonna know that the deer's there, but having a trace of it gives you clues to it and better informs you about the world that you're living in. So I felt like this better informed me about the world that I was living in, despite the fact that oftentimes I was just missing these things in the woods all the time. And it also gave me a three-dimensional object, and a photograph would work really well too, but a three-dimensional object from the plaster cast that also helped me not only remember this, but share it with others, right? So then it gave me this object that then I could go and share with my parents and go, man, look what we found. This was so cool. And also share with friends. And this became sort of important maybe later on as I realized how this was actually operating. A symbol for something else. I also like the ephemeral quality to this. Deer track is not something that sticks around for a very long time, and it makes it sometimes difficult to track them down. Making it a plaster cast becomes something that is less ephemeral and easier to hold on to. All right, so if we go to the next image.
The one, the snow. Sorry.
The snow.
Yeah.
All right, so first off, with this image, I just find this like unbelievably beautiful. I found myself fixed on taking pictures of snow, to the point that after a big snow and I was on the way to the grocery store, I would find myself stopping either on the way to or from, just to take pictures of it. So my phone was like filling up with images of all of these images of snow. And I know there's some things specifically about it that I love. The forms, textures, negative space, ephemeral quality, all of those things are important about that. But I felt like there was more to it than just that, or otherwise I wouldn't be taking pictures of it. It like captured my imagination in ways that I felt like I needed to explore. So I actually started collecting chunks of snow and pulling them into my studio to make casts of these objects as a way to further investigate the sorts of things that were really interesting about these things. One of the things that I liked about this is that it set up this sort of like co-collaborating with nature in a way that I didn't feel like I had ever really done before, not intentionally so. One of the things that's cool about collaborating with somebody is you have to give something up to get something back. And so any of the preconceived ideas that I might have about how to work with clay, what something should look like or how it should feel, all of those things have to be negotiated terms as soon as you start collaborating. And that became really rich and exciting to start giving up certain things so that I could get certain things back. So to get a certain texture, to get a certain form, to create a certain negative space, I had to give up certain things, my control of the material, to allow those things to happen. And that was really exciting and sort of a new way of thinking about studio practice for me. One of the things that's cool is once you pull something into your studio, the process takes over, right? So we involved in clay oftentimes are heavy oriented on process, and that becomes like an essential part of what it is that we're doing. And so as soon as you take a physical object, a pile of snow, and try and make a cast of that, then the negative reads differently. The new positive from that in a new material, a new color, reads differently as well. And all of that I felt like was really cool in the way that it helped me change my own perception of what it was that I was seeing. I saw snow and ice and I was interested in that. That being turned into wax all of a sudden helped me see it as a completely new thing. All kinds of interesting forms that were changed for me, that allowed me to read it in a different way. And I found that to be very exciting and very fresh and new as I was sort of working through the process, trying to take my original idea and to spit it out, and noticing that what was coming out of the studio was maybe not what was going into the studio. I also think that the idea of changing something ever so slightly, changing the color, changing the transparency of something, and how that allows a change in perception of something is rich, and just like really awesome to sort of investigate and to think about. And that was helping me as an individual to do that, but also hopefully as I put the work out, sort of doing the same for others as well. All right, if we go to this next slide. So this is a slide taken in my studio. As you can see, it's quite a mess. Hopefully what we can get out of this is that we have two individuals that are both looking at the same object. Both of these individuals happen to be staring at a nickel, but they are placed on opposite sides of the nickel. So what they're seeing is two different things. So a discussion after this quick event taking place would lead to some confusion. And I think there's lots of stories and myths that date hundreds and thousands of years back about this sort of idea, right? That even a trickster comes in and sort of allows one person to see one thing and another person to see another thing, and then chaos ensues as a result of that. Here you have two individuals seeing the same thing, coming away with two totally different perspectives of what's going on. I find that to be very interesting and also very poignant to what's going on right now in our world. If we flip to the next.
I think you only.
Is there another?
I think you only sent me 3. No.
Okay, so so I took one more photo and changed it ever so slightly, and that is to take both of the individuals and put them on the same side of the coin. So they're seeing things almost exactly from the same perspective, maybe not quite from the exact same perspective, but as close as possible. And I feel like if we allow politics to enter into the discussion for just a second, sometimes it feels when that happens that even when we see the same thing from the same side, those things still wind up with the same confusion and some of the same disparate points of view that are had, just like the first example that you're seeing there. I find this very rich and very interesting, and it's one of the things that I continue to think about in my work is how this happens. How do you have one stimulus and from that so many different perspectives that come off of that? It just seems daily that is a real interest as well as concern of mine. If we take this back into some of the things that I'm making, the cups are really simple form, especially ones without handles. My early work was oftentimes thrown in a very loose style, simple gestural, while trying to learn important lessons about like how materials work, how the science and the art sort of meet when it comes to having clay. Function of these cups is possible. Like they do have regular glazes on them that would allow you to drink out of them, and they do become functional cups in that sort of way. But I'm hoping that beyond just the simple act of drinking, which I think is very important and has a lot of rich potential, something that Casey spoke really nicely about. If these do a little bit more than just the simple act of drinking, it might be that you would question what you see and why, and even have a conversation about those things. So if they are pulled from very specific things, casts of things that hold water, then it might possibly bring attention back to the things that I was interested in, the things that I was looking at. And I felt like that was part of the reason why casts of something were essential to the process of what I was doing.
Yeah. That's beautifully taken in a full circle kind of way, showing all these different aspects of that same concept of perspectives and a duality that's constant, I think, in what you're talking about.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Shannon. Lovely. And as I said, anyone who wants to put questions in the chat, I see some people have, and some comments, and we'll come back to those when we are ready to talk again. So Trisha is next. I just have to get my screen to cooperate with me. There we go. Trisha Kyner is an associate professor of art at the Community College of Baltimore County. She holds a BA from University of California, Santa Cruz, a BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago, and an MFA from the University of Montana. She lives in a converted grocery store in Baltimore, Maryland, with fellow artist David Freedom and 2 cats. Me too. Her work has been shown at Grounds for Sculpture. I wonder if they're open.
I don't know.
We could walk around there. It's outside. The National Council for Education and Ceramic Arts, and the National Gallery of Art in Mumbai, India. She's been awarded residencies at Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts, the Clay Studio of Missoula, and AIR Belarus in France. So welcome, Trisha. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jennifer, and hi to everyone. First, maybe I'll just start a little bit with this piece and how it came about. I tend to work in periods of about 5 years, and this is one of my favorite, this is the best piece I think out of a 5-year period. So I was really excited that it's in the show. And I guess I'll start out because you'll notice I'm sitting kind of like the piece. When I begin any sculpture like this, I always work figuratively, by the way. It's my shtick. But I start out with a search for pose. And with this piece, I was kind of in a mood of wanting to be left alone. And I was thinking of naturalistic poses, sort of in isolation and also tied to work. And this is the way I sit when I don't have a chair. I have my little chair today, but if I'm just crouched in the studio, this is the way I sit when I do a task. The other big influence was that I had just gone to Amsterdam. I was lucky enough to spend a summer in Amsterdam staying at a fellow artist's house. And I really had a wonderful summer looking at Dutch paintings. And many of these were of working class women, kitchens, a lot of fish. And I was thinking about basic tasks again. And I decided I wanted to make this piece in this very naturalistic pose, a utilitarian pose, that would also sort of be a sly joke on the idea of women in nature and the nude in nature. So what she's doing, the piece is called Strippen ein Vis, and that translates into gutting a fish in Dutch. And she has her trout here, and she's just made an incision in the trout, holding it the way I was taught to cut and gut a fish when I was a kid. And the coloration and things like that was in some ways influenced by those wonderful Dutch paintings as well. I was thinking about nudes of women in nature that are glamorized and exoticized and, you know, lolling over rocks by creeks and things. You especially see it in photography. And I wanted something much more utilitarian. So I imagined kind of a primeval scene with this woman simply wanting to gut her fish by a stream and maybe being interrupted and looking a little bit like, what are you bothering me for? So that's how this piece kind of came together. And one of the things I might just address, especially I'm enjoying the craziness of Zoom because I'm tilting my head this way, she's tilting her head this way in our little square. I really love mimicry and pantomime, and that's always important to my work. I don't think of them as self-portraits, though I work for myself. I think of these guys as surrogates who go out in the world. And I don't want verisimilitude as my main goal. I love color too much. I love exaggeration and gesture too much. So saying that, I guess what else? We've got some good slides of me making it, some good images. So ceramicists, I'm a teacher. So here, I'll show you how I do these things. The rock is actually an earthenware clay, and I built it first. I grew up in California, Colorado, and all my relatives came from Colorado, and that's where I did my fishing. And if you've ever been to Western Colorado, you know it's all about red sandstone rock. So started out with that and then built the figure directly on it. The figure is in a cone 6 porcelain. And I use, as you can see, exterior armatures as I build. I think there's one back a little more, what's a little earlier in the process. So I build hollow, a lot of small slabs, and sometimes building part of the figure off and then bringing it in. I built her actually from the pelvis out, built the feet and calves separately, then attached. all hollow, all on the rock. And then about a little, when I got to the arms and the neck and the head, I had to build the exterior armature. Right now I've got, that you see here to hold it up. You can also see that part of my process, I draw, and I draw large and life size. I love the one-on-one relationship of creating these works that enter into the gallery and have a one-on-one relationship with the viewer. That's really important to me. I studied a lot of feminist theory back in the day at Santa Cruz, a lot of stuff about subject and object and women's representation. And these objects, I want them to have definitely a spark of the subject, whether it's in the gesture, a little bit of liveliness and something to slightly disconcert the viewer. And also that the life-size scale imbues a certain presence that enters. And yet they deal with their own stasis, the fact that they're objects and can't move. I want them kind of dealing with it as a problem often. So she's kind of stuck and in the pose, in a sense, looking up at somebody looking at her, I guess.
Well, she's taking away the power of the viewer by acknowledging their gaze, right?
Yeah, what Bertolt Brecht called direct address. Yes.
Yeah. Like you said, and,
for all you theater people.
right. And what Manet was, why everybody hated his Olympia, because she was looking at it.
Exactly. The prostitute looked back. K horror.
Yeah. Great. Did you, I didn't mean to interrupt if you still.
No, go ahead. Ask a question.
Yeah. Just, I mean, it's wonderful to see this in process. And even when it has no arms and no head, it's so evocative. Each little way that her, the meat where her knee is folding is just, it's familiar. It's exactly evocative of a body in a way that is exciting when you see it in process.
Yeah, there's a wonderful filmmaker, Yvonne Rainer, who talks about loving the little details. And that's how you acknowledge individuality. And sometimes, a portrait isn't in the face, it's in a crease. And I've always held that to somehow as another way to avoid objectification, is to find those wonderful individual details and in the small bits. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely. And I hope that at some point in the future, I get to see it in real life.
You'll have to come down to Baltimore.
Yeah. Well, that's another question I'll save to the end of Colorado to Baltimore. But thank you so much, Trisha.
You're welcome.
All right. Raymond is next. Raymond first came to clay while working at an archaeology museum here in Philadelphia, where he was surrounded by centuries of ceramic artifacts from across the globe, and where he helped reconstruct pots that had been excavated as shards. From there, he took pottery classes at his neighborhood art center and eventually began teaching ceramics. Raymond has exhibited his work in numerous juried and invitational exhibitions, including the NCECA Biennial 2015, Craft Forms, and the Zanesville Prize. And he has earned a prize from the Australian Ceramics Association and an article by Garth Clark in C-File. Most recently, Raymond served as a studio tech at a university ceramics department, which is where his series of leather hards began. Raymond is still inspired by his earliest readings about ceramics, including Soetsu Yanagi's The Unknown Craftsman and Paulus Berenson's Finding One's Way with Clay, which includes this preface by Mary Richards. My bias has been to behold the radiant contentance of the deep in every instance of clay. My insistence has been that we become aware and sacrifice the self-will of our habits of judging and aspiring. This kind of breathing between selfless beholding and self-full awareness tends to produce a new quality in both beholding and behavior. The eye grows free of bias wherever it looks. and the heart grows beyond its past desires. A new being begins to form. Raymond and I have been talking recently about having a book club to read MC Richards' Centering. So if anyone's interested, let me know. Maybe we'll have a Zoom about it. Raymond, would you like to take it away?
Hi everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, maybe skip ahead a couple slides so people can see the front view.
That one?
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, it's funny. I had this background in museums and with artifacts and objects, ceramics, and I've been thinking about it a lot lately as in our time when people are talking about monuments and erasures and removals and looking at objects and artifacts in a different way. And so I think it's funny, I'm saying this up front, but it's kind of what I realized after I did this series and installed it. So these are called leather hards because I wanted to preserve that state of clay. We all know what leather hard is. And it's that really exciting stage where the clay hasn't been baked yet and hasn't been transformed into something irreversible. It's still, you can still change it, alter it, you can melt it down, whatever. And I always miss that stage when once I fire a piece, I kind of miss the leather hard. So that was one part of this, was to sort of give leather hard a little stage. But also, these literally are rescues from a studio reclaim bucket, a scrap bucket. I was a studio tech, and I had the job of recycling the clay every day. And as you know, you look in the bucket and there's just muck, but also there's these sort of false starts and abandoned pieces and half started ideas and all. And I found myself falling in love with them because there's something about the way they were in the mud still that appealed to me. And I didn't want to destroy them by putting them in the pug mill and mixing them up with everything. So I started photographing them. And eventually I actually started to physically scoop them out of the bucket and put them aside. And then eventually I began to fire them, all in the course of my job. I didn't miss a beat in doing my job. I was creating at the same time, which I didn't realize, but later I thought, that's interesting, that you can combine creativity and labor seamlessly. So what I was exploring here was that funny, ambiguous boundary line between when an object becomes an object and when it is still material. So some of these look just like lumps of clay, and others look like they could be an object. And I always want to know, how do we know that? And this piggybacks off of a previous series I did a few years before that, where it was prompted by, I was digging in my garden one day in my backyard, and I unearthed an old rusty horseshoe. And it was just a fragment, and it was the exact color of the dirt. But I knew instantly what it was, even though we don't have horses around these days, delivering milk or anything. And it prompted me to think about, how is it that we know instantly that something isn't just a piece of dirt and that it's man-made? What's that instinct? So this series before, I started to investigate that by challenging myself to make objects I had never seen before and to see, what it was that makes people recognize their objects. And so that series was called Handhelds. Jennifer?
Oh, we lost you for a sec. You're back.
Can I share my screen?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Let me give you. Okay, you should be good.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can, or I can.
Okay. So this is the result of me trying to make imaginary objects that no one had ever seen before. And it was so hard because it's funny, you just end up making something that you recognize, but still in this grouping, there are things that are really puzzling and they're not easily identified. So there's that boundary line again between how do we know when something is an object and how do we know when it's just something random or whatever. And when I stood back and looked at all these, I realized how much they look like tools. And I realized how there was like a built-in symmetry, a built-in balance. They were all scaled to the size of a hand. I started thinking about tool making and how we're hardwired to make tools. And then I started to research this and realized that, we've been making art, cave paintings like 30,000 years ago. And we were making ceramics about 10,000 years ago. But we were making tools 3.5 million years ago. So it made me realize something about the relationship between tool making and art making, all the different connections between functionality, aesthetics, balance, that sort of innate recognition as humans about like what is art, what is artifact, And so I think it's a really important thing to recognize in ourselves. I think it's what unites all of us. Like when I see the show at the Clay Studio National, and you can go back, Jennifer, to sharing your screen.
You have to click stop share, Raymond.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. So, yeah, show the gallery shot again. Yeah. So what was so great about this exhibit, I thought, was this vast variety of art and art making. And even the materials, they weren't all strictly clay, ceramics. Some people were using fabric, hair, and beads, so I think it's a nice thing that these abandoned objects that I rescued from a scrap bucket can be there side by side with other objects that run the range of something very finished to something that's sort of like an idea, a gesture, and that they're from different materials in combination. And so I think the genius of this show is how Jennifer and the other jurors just found a way to assemble this kind of moment in ceramics and what's happening. And when I think about the other jurors, like when I think about Lauren Sandler's work and how her stuff accumulates artifacts from or an archaeological task, and I think Kukui and her work, which references ancient Peruvian ceramics with today's contemporary topics. And when I think about Sana and how her objects tell stories of different cultures, and so I think like there's this great idea that we're all in this together, and even though our work may look different and have different intentions, there's something that really holds us all together about all this. And so anyway.
Yeah, Raymond, I was actually, just before you sort of verbalized that, I've been thinking about that, just listening to the four of you, that really I think the art world in general, it's in pursuit of understanding and connecting humanity, which is what excites me about it, and why, as a non-artist, being involved in the arts and helping present art to the rest of the world is, I think, an important pursuit, because it really can, in a non-verbal way, allow people to feel connected to other humans. And that is so much of the art that I'm drawn to, is about sort of searching for those connections between how we do common things like eating and drinking, how we connect with each other, how we're all examining the same things. I mean, a lot of what you were saying so well resonated with what Shannon does when he's looking at snow formations, and you're looking at formations of clay in the reclaim bucket. And
I actually have pictures of snow too. I totally got with Shannon.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, that's great.
Gestures, Joe.
Say that again, Trisha.
Gesture. I love the gesture and Ray's work.
Yeah. And
the
it's
gesture
about
of the material. Yeah.
And how those things, they look like human parts as well. And that's what a good tool is, an extension of your hand and your arm. And yeah, it just makes me get all excited. I love it. It's great. And a really wonderful thing too is you go through all these images when you're jurying something, and you pick the things that you think are, I mean, first of all, so many things that were wonderful don't get chosen for whatever reason, but you go through and you're kind of trying to find a through line, but also just looking for what's speaking to you and what you respond to. And then when you get them into the room or onto the screen, as we've done with the exhibition online, you really start to see those physical connections. Like that image that Raymond took is so great, because you see the different patterns happening in the gallery, and the color tones, and it's exciting, because it really does show us that we are deeply connected, no matter what our differences are. Humans are, and that if we understood each other better, so many problems would be eased. And again, that's one of the incredible values of art, is that if we continue to work towards understanding each other better, that's really the way that we'll find a way forward. No pressure, guys. Art's gonna save the world, so keep going. Okay, I'm gonna read
more work to be done.
More work to be done. Well,
Raymond, I really appreciate the idea of creativity tied to labor, and I really love the way that you express that. I think it's so important, and I think increasingly so when we move into a digital world and we have so many other things that are right there in front of our face, grabbing our attention. The act of labor, still trying to find creativity in that. That's one of the things that I think I love the way that you expressed it, and it's one of the things that I continue to sort of wrestle with in my own practice is, where's your time focused, and how do you take something, if you are working on this labor task, and turn that into something more sophisticated, something more celebrated, something creative.
Yeah, it was funny. I kind of stumbled into it. I didn't realize what I was doing until after a while, and I realized, oh, I've been making art when I thought I was just recycling clay. But I think it's interesting too now that during this pandemic, when we've all found ways to alter the way we work, and even though it's been a huge challenge, I think a lot of good has come out of it. Like these Zoom meetings, for one thing. Like, I love the idea that we can just talk to different artists and curators and friends about art in, like, it was a First Friday, but with a bigger reach, you know. And yeah, so I think when we do go back to in-person encounters, I think we might still do these lunch
Yeah.
and learns.
I agree. I think it's been so great. And the labor point, I think, Trisha, you might speak to that as well, because you're celebrating labor. That's what this, you know, sculpture is about, really.
Yeah.
And the movements of labor and our postures and you know, how the simplicity of a task and focus. And I think that, at least for me, during this period of time, that has been an anchor. The simplicity of the task, and whether it's in the studio or, you know, or cleaning the house or whatever, but the simplicity of the task is kind of a way to anchor ourselves, especially with a lot of multi-focuses coming in on us, a lot of multitasking going on. Just the focus on the task.
Yeah.
It's funny that what you do is kind of remove posturing, even though it took a posture to get to that point.
Yes.
That's good, Raymond. And just as we're talking about these things, I think Diana and maybe Sandy are in their studios making work and doing labor while they're watching and talking. So that's just continues that wonderful cycle. So I'm just going to switch over to our questions really quick. From the sublime to the specific, Jennifer Martin asks Casey if he's using flashing slip.
Yes. Yeah. I have a small studio. I'll show you the studio here. It's like this shelf. It's in a shared space, and I have that shelf. But that one bucket down there is my slip, and the other one is my glaze. I keep a really minimal material usage, and so I've found one slip that works really well for my process. And the variety of color and surface that I achieve is all from the down firing of the kiln for the most part. And there's just like truly an amazing amount of variation that you can get just from changing the atmosphere of the down firing or prolonging it, or just like anything really. So yeah, I do have that pot that I have in the show right here. And so there is that slip on it there. And it's a high refractory slip. If anyone is familiar with like alumina silica ratios, it has about a 2.5 to 1 silica to alumina ratio. So it's very refractory, and it almost resists the soda, but when it does take on that soda, it does become very matte and very stony, especially with the reduced down firing. And I have all my recipes on my website too. So if you want to try that slip out, it's on my website there. It's part of the whole wanting to distort the information and hoping that it'll spark some others' research as well.
Yeah, that is great. That's great that that's there. And you can throw your website into the chat if you want. I just put our donation link that I said I would do. So other people, Raymond said he loves your reds, Casey. Love, and then Michelle says, love the warmth and contrast of colors. Sturdy, Diana says, sturdy, timeless looking like pots from Provence. Very satisfying shapes and glazes. Wade says, wonderful work, Casey and Shannon. And then, when Shannon was talking about being in the woods, Raymond said he remembers building forts with his brother and when they were kids. I did that too. So fun. And then Jen asked another material question. I think she might not be here anymore. I'll have to tell her what the answers were. What material is the saucer? Yeah, Shannon, I meant to ask you. You never said it. It's a resin, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a resin saucer with, color added.
Okay. And, oh, there she is. Hi. What was the name of the film? I think that one's for Trisha. Wait. You mentioned a film.
I mentioned a filmmaker, Yvonne Rainer. Rainer, yeah, wonderful works that often, photograph women's bodies in interesting ways.
R-A-N-I-E-R?
Yeah.
Okay.
A photographer and filmmaker.
Got it, thank you. Wade says, great work, Trisha. Jennifer, beautiful Raymond, I love that you're capturing finding beauty and celebrating moments in time and our history. And Wade says, thanks, Raymond, incredibly insightful and poignant talk. Back to soda, we are gonna have a soda kiln in the new building, right, Jen? Yes, she's nodding.
That is the plan. Bailey is making an indoor soda that has some really nice ventilation extraction systems right around the peeps. So hopefully we'll be able to throw it out. Yeah.
That sounds yummy.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Yes.
Super exciting.
Well, and then speaking of new building and supporting us and supporting the artists, we, of course, all these things are still available for sale. So if anyone is interested, you can go on our website or let me know and we can help. Trisha can drive her sculpture to your house, depending on where you live. I'm so pleased. I love it when we can have these wonderful conversations and talk about the important work everybody's doing, and that we're all still here and connecting. So thanks again, everyone. I hope you'll tune in next week. We're going to have our opening celebration for 100 Years, 100 Women. Next Tuesday is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote in the U.S. So, and Trisha has work in that show too. Please join us for that.
Shout out to my student, Deval. That's my student. There, we found her. Hi, Deval.
Great.
And all the relatives.
Oh, and there's Ellen. I was worried I didn't see you before. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Feel free to turn on your video and say bye as you leave, and we'll see you soon. Hi, Wade.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Great
Bye.
job.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Great conversation.
Thanks, Beverly.
Yeah.